We build barriers with misunderstanding. We tear them down with language. That's what the janitor said. But here's what the principal really heard: a man who'd been silent for 17 years suddenly speaking 9 languages like a trained diplomat. What happened next? Even the federal files couldn't explain. Why was a janitor secretly using Latin, Arabic, and Russian in a school hallway? And what did the principal find inside that sealed envelope marked with a classified seal? This is not just about hidden talent, it's about the moment truth walked out of a boiler room and stood on a stage. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. It was another quiet Monday morning at Lincoln Preparatory Academy, a private K-12 school tucked into the affluent edge of Cedar Heights. The red brick building gleamed under the morning sun as cars lined up to drop off students in pressed uniforms. Inside, the school was buzzing with the usual morning rush: teachers printing handouts, students filing into homerooms, the faint squeak of sneakers on polished tile floors. The air carried the scent of fresh coffee, lemon-scented floor cleaner, and 100 ambitions whispered between staff and student alike. At the very edge of this bustle, nearly invisible, moved Mr. Harold Benton, the school janitor. A 51-year-old African-American black man with close-cropped salt and pepper hair, Harold was lean, about 5 feet 10 inches, and always dressed in the same navy blue coveralls and faded white sneakers. His deep brown eyes were steady but distant, and he walked the halls with the quiet familiarity of someone who had seen everything, and chosen to say nothing. He rarely spoke unless spoken to, and when he did, it was always polite, succinct, and unremarkable. Students passed him without a second glance, and faculty regarded him with cordial indifference. He started each day by checking the bathrooms, unlocking the gymnasium, and hauling trash bags to the side lot. His movements were mechanical but methodical. No one questioned Harold's routines, not even Principal Meredith Langford, a 47-year-old white American woman with auburn hair in a sharp bob, tailored pantsuits, and a no-nonsense air that demanded order. Her office was a glass-walled nerve center overlooking the main corridor, from which she orchestrated her school like a military campaign. Meredith was exacting, respected, and often feared. She ran Lincoln Prep like a precision watch. She didn't tolerate gossip, didn't mingle casually, and certainly didn't waste time chit-chatting with custodial staff. She viewed the school's janitorial department as necessary gears in a larger machine, not subjects of curiosity. So when she emerged from her office just past 9:30 a.m. to hear a deep male voice echoing down the administrative hallway, non, ce n'est pas ici. Peut-être elle était Odessus. Meredith stopped mid-stride. She turned sharply. Through the half-open door to the supply room, she saw Harold leaning slightly over a lost-looking man in a gray suit who clutched a leather briefcase and looked very much not from around here. Without hesitation, Harold repeated the directions in fluent French, then smoothly transitioned into German, and finally asked, "Or would English be more comfortable for you, sir?" The man blinked, surprised. "Ah. English, yes. But, thank you, really." He bowed slightly before heading upstairs, still visibly impressed. Harold turned back toward the cleaning cart, his face unreadable, and resumed organizing bottles of cleaner and a mop like nothing had happened. Unaware, or perhaps uncaring, of the stunned figure behind the door. Meredith remained frozen for several long seconds. She'd worked in education administration for 2 decades, prided herself on spotting talent, and trusted her instincts. But never in 100 years had she considered Harold Benton more than a polite janitor with excellent attendance. She stepped back into her office, closed the door, and sat in her chair like a woman who had just seen a ghost. She stared at her computer screen, the blinking cursor on an unfinished memo forgotten. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, then dropped into her lap. What had she just witnessed? The next day, Harold returned to his quiet routine as if nothing had happened. The same calm demeanor, the same purposeful strides, the same early morning hum as he wiped down classroom door handles and emptied trash bins. But Principal Langford had not slept. She kept playing the moment over in her mind, the cadence of Harold's French, the ease of his switch into German, the confident, elegant phrasing. Not just fluent, native, she had lived in Paris during her graduate years. She knew the difference. At precisely 7:58 a.m., Meredith buzzed her secretary. "Pull Harold Benton's personnel file for me. Everything." Within minutes, a slim blue folder was placed on her desk. She opened it with the reverence of a detective breaking open a cold case. Name, Harold L. Benton DOB, March 22, 1974. Position, Janitorial Services Supervisor. Start date, September 2006. Education, high school diploma, Pinewood Public High, class of 1992. Certifications, basic custodial safety training, hazardous waste disposal, first aid. That was it. No college. No military. No foreign travel. No extracurriculars. No language proficiency noted. Not a single indication that this man should be able to communicate in multiple languages, let alone 9, which she would confirm later after secretly reviewing a segment of hallway camera footage. He had also spoken Mandarin. Clearly. Frustrated and intrigued, Meredith decided to test him. Later that week, she encountered Harold near the auditorium and greeted him casually. "Buenos dias, Señor Benton." He didn't blink. "Buenos dias, Señora Langford. ¿Cómo está usted hoy?" "Muy bien, gracias," she replied evenly, trying not to betray the accelerating curiosity gnawing at her. As she walked away, she glanced over her shoulder. Harold had already returned to adjusting the stage lights, completely unfazed. That evening, Meredith opened a private browser tab on her home computer and began searching. Harold Benton, languages, linguist, Cedar Heights, military service, academic journals. Nothing relevant. She cross-checked databases. Local archives. University publications. LinkedIn. She even called an old friend at the Department of Education. No leads. She leaned back in her chair, brow furrowed, eyes narrowed. This man was a ghost. A complete non-entity on paper. But ghosts don't speak flawless French, German, Spanish, and what sounded like Mandarin. The question wasn't just, who is Harold Benton? It was, why is he hiding? And Meredith Langford had never been good at letting mysteries rest. Especially when they made her question how much she really understood the world she controlled. She wouldn't be able to let this go. Not this time. Not when it had just become personal. Meredith Langford didn't like gray areas. Everything in her world was labeled, categorized, and filed into the appropriate drawer. When she couldn't place someone, it irritated her. But Harold Benton wasn't just misplaced. He was invisible. The morning after her failed deep dive into Harold's history, she arrived at school earlier than usual. She watched from her office window as Harold shoveled mulch near the faculty parking lot. She studied his posture, how he carried the weight of the shovel, the meticulousness of his spacing between the garden beds. He did even menial labor like a craftsman. She scribbled in her notepad, discipline. Intention. Training, by lunch, she had a plan. She asked IT to print the last 3 years of building access logs, nothing that would raise suspicion. She said it was for efficiency auditing. When she received the printouts, Harold's keycard showed odd patterns, early weekend entries, late nights, and used access to basement records rooms that hadn't been touched in years. She pulled her assistant aside. "Do we store anything in Records B anymore?" "No," the young woman said, flipping through her planner. "Just old surplus desks and textbook copies. Maintenance sometimes uses it." "Only maintenance?" "Yes, ma'am." That night, Meredith returned after hours. She walked the halls slowly, flashlight in hand. The school echoed around her, hollow and eerie without students. When she reached Records B, she hesitated. A faint hum escaped the doorframe. Fluorescent light buzzed inside. She pushed it open. Stacks of books lined the back wall, not school-issued textbooks but philosophy, linguistics, journals, technical manuals in a variety of languages. A whiteboard stood in the corner, covered in handwritten translations, phonetic breakdowns, and sentence structures. There was also a chair. A worn leather one. And a folded wool blanket. Harold had been living here. Or at the very least, hiding here. Studying, perhaps teaching himself. Or someone else. She backed out slowly, heart hammering, unsure whether to feel violated or fascinated. The next morning, she watched Harold walk into the school from the staff parking lot. Same calm gait. Same tired shoes. Same unreadable eyes. She said nothing. But she would speak soon. It was Friday. Meredith waited until the halls quieted after the final bell before summoning Harold to her office. He knocked twice. "Come in." He entered and closed the door behind him. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Have a seat." He did. They sat in silence for several long seconds. "Mr. Benton," she began carefully, "how many languages do you speak?" He didn't answer immediately. His face didn't change. But something behind his eyes shifted. "9, he said simply. "Fluently. Enough to pass for native in 7. Conversational in 2 more." She nodded slowly. "You're self-taught?" "Mostly. Some through immersion. Some necessity." "Necessity?" "In my former life," he replied, voice calm. "It required adaptability." "And what was that life?" A long pause. He glanced at the window. "I've cleaned for 15 years here, Principal Langford. I've never missed a day. I know the names of every child, their lockers, which ones pretend to forget lunch so they can hide in the library. I know which teachers are kind, and which ones are cruel when no one watches. And I know the pipes under this school better than the architects who designed them. That's the life I live now." She sat still, absorbing the precision in his voice. "And the life before this one?" Another pause. Then, simply, "Unimportant." She leaned back. "You know that's not true." He smiled faintly. "Not important to this job. Not to this place." Meredith tapped her pen on her notebook. "You're hiding. I'm surviving. There's a difference." Their eyes locked. Silence filled the room like smoke. Finally, she spoke again. "Would you teach here?" Now it was Harold's turn to blink. "As a janitor? As a linguist? As a mentor? As someone these kids could actually learn from?" He said nothing for a long time. Then quietly, "Would they listen?" She folded her hands. "They will if I tell them to." Harold stood. "That's a lot of power, Principal Langford." She stood too. "Yes. And it's time I used it for something worthwhile." He walked out of her office without another word. But something had changed. Not just in him. In her. And it was just the beginning. The following Monday, Meredith Langford summoned her department chairs to a closed-door meeting in the conference room next to her office. A large whiteboard stood behind her, filled with notes, arrows, and a single bold phrase at the center, "Unlocking Hidden Genius." "What if I told you," she began, tapping the board with a marker, "that someone on our custodial staff speaks 9 languages fluently, including Mandarin, Russian, Arabic, and Latin?" Confused glances passed between the department heads. A few chuckled politely. One muttered, "You're joking." "I'm not. His name is Harold Benton." A beat of silence. "The janitor," said Mr. Rayborn, the history lead, raising an eyebrow. "Janitorial supervisor," Meredith corrected crisply. "And I am proposing that we offer Mr. Benton a special appointment as a visiting language enrichment mentor." He would work with select students twice a week in a pilot program. That sounds admirable, said Ms. Chiu, the AP English teacher. But has he taught before? Does he have credentials? Credentials, Meredith said, emphasizing the word, aren't always the best measure of capability. You teach rhetoric, Ellen. Do you know how many rhetorical devices he used in one casual conversation with me last Friday? Murmurs around the table. But what about optics? Asked the science department chair, Dr. Nelson. Parents pay nearly 30 grand a year in tuition. Will they accept a janitor teaching their kids, even in a limited capacity? Meredith smiled tightly. I'll handle the optics. What I need from you is an open mind, and a recommendation for which students might benefit most from exposure to a polyglot perspective. The meeting ended with mixed responses. Some intrigued, others skeptical. But none openly defiant. That afternoon, Meredith caught Harold near the boiler room. Mr. Benton, she said. You're officially being offered a paid pilot mentorship role. Twice a week. Discreet at first. He was silent. It's your choice. But I think there's more than one kind of maintenance this school needs. He stared at her, then gave the faintest nod. I'll try it. Thank you. She left him standing by the boiler room, hands still in his pockets, but his eyes brighter. Later that evening, Harold stood alone in Recordsby, running his fingers along the spine of a worn Italian grammar book. He glanced at the whiteboard, now wiped clean, and began writing again. Not just for himself this time. By midweek, the pilot mentorship had begun. Meredith chose room 217, a quiet conference room tucked in the school's old wing, for Harold's sessions. The first meeting hosted 5 students, 2 gifted juniors, a freshman from the speech team, and a senior who spent more time in detention than class. Meredith had hand-picked them herself. When Harold entered, dressed in a pressed-collared shirt and slacks instead of coveralls, the students exchanged wide-eyed glances. One of them whispered, "Isn't that the janitor?" He closed the door behind him and walked calmly to the head of the table. "My name is Mr. Benton," he said. "And today, we're going to learn how language reveals power." He picked up a piece of chalk and wrote 3 words on the blackboard, *veritas. Potestas. Vox, Latin, he said. Truth. Power. Voice. The room grew quiet. Then he switched to French, then Mandarin, then Arabic, speaking each phrase with precision and clarity. By the time he returned to English, their jaws were slack. Let's begin. Word of Harold's class spread quickly. By Friday, half the faculty had heard about it. Some praised it. Others whispered behind closed doors. That afternoon, Dr. Nelson cornered Meredith in the staff lounge. "Heard you've turned a mop into a maestro." "I've empowered someone who deserved more than silence," she replied. "And what happens when the parents find out? They'll thank me. Or they'll question me. But either way, they'll be watching something that matters." What Meredith didn't know was that someone else was already watching, closely. That evening, as Harold locked room 217 and walked down the hall, a man in a dark suit stepped out of a nearby office alcove. He watched Harold disappear around the corner, then pulled out a slim black phone and made a call. "I found him," he said. A pause. "Yes. It's definitely him." Then silence. The man in the dark suit had a name, though few at Lincoln Prep would ever know it. Agent Richard Weller had once worked for an international intelligence unit, now repurposed under a private global consultancy, part surveillance, part recruitment, part cleanup. Weller wasn't here by accident. He had been tracking Harold Benton for over a decade. Back in 2003, Harold Benton, then known as Langston Hale, had been a civilian linguist contracted by a NATO-backed operation. He'd vanished after a classified mission in Eastern Europe went sideways. Files were sealed. Dead men were buried. But those who mattered never forgot the name. Weller watched from across the street as Harold, now a janitor, helped a crying kindergartner tie her shoes before guiding her gently toward the bus circle. The image was surreal. Langston Hale had once spoken 6 dialects of Arabic under interrogation without flinching. And now he handed out goldfish crackers. Inside the school, Meredith Langford had noticed a shift in Harold. Not fear, but stillness. The way he moved more carefully. The way his eyes lingered on unfamiliar faces. She sensed it, even if she didn't understand it yet. That afternoon, a sealed envelope appeared on her desk. No return address. Inside was a grainy photo of Harold, much younger, in military fatigues, standing beside an armored vehicle. A red marker circled his face. Attached, a note in block letters. "Do you really know who he is?" She stared at it for nearly 10 minutes. No logo, no watermark. Just that question. That evening, Harold found a folded note under the windshield of his truck. One word, handwritten in blue ink, Langston. He closed his eyes. Memories came in a flood, the cold nights in an unmarked base, the shouts, the blood on stone floors, the weight of decisions he could never undo. He had chosen this life, mops and chalkboards, silence and solitude, because it was the furthest thing from what came before. But now the past had come calling. Harold didn't show up for his mentorship session the next day. Room 217 sat empty. Students waited, then trickled away. Meredith was notified. She left 2 voicemails, then walked the halls herself. She checked the boiler room. The gym. The cafeteria. No sign of him. Records B was locked. That night, she drove to the address listed in his file, a small rented duplex on the edge of town. Lights off. No car in the driveway. She left a note on the door, * we need to talk. Please, * meanwhile, Agent Weller sat in a black sedan parked 2 blocks away, watching her leave. He made another call. He knows we're here. He's going to vanish again. Can you intercept him? If I push now, he'll disappear forever. We have to wait. Let him surface. Back at school, Meredith sat in her office late into the night. She reread the anonymous note, then Harold's file, then opened a locked drawer and removed the security footage she had downloaded weeks earlier. She watched him on loop, walking, cleaning, pausing to help a student pick up dropped books. Every movement deliberate. Every act humble. "Who are you, really?" she whispered to the screen. The next morning, Harold returned. He entered her office without knocking, dressed not in his coveralls but in a dark suit. He sat across from her. His face was lined, but his eyes had a fire she hadn't seen before. "I need to resign," he said. "No. You don't understand what's coming. You don't understand what you started here. These kids need you. You changed something." He looked away. "I was never supposed to be seen. But you were. And you showed them what excellence looks like." He stood. "Then make sure they remember the lesson. Even if I disappear." He turned to leave. "Langston," she said softly. He froze. She stood, stepping around her desk. "Whoever you were, whoever you are, you don't have to keep running. Not here. Not anymore." For a long time, Harold didn't move. Then finally, he turned and said, "Then help me make this right. Before it's too late." Meredith knew the moment she said, "Help me make this right," she had crossed a threshold that wasn't hers to own. But it was too late for hesitation. She cleared her calendar for the morning, locked the office door, and asked Harold to sit down again. "Tell me what you need." Harold hesitated, then removed a thin, creased envelope from his inside jacket pocket. He placed it gently on her desk. "I kept this hidden since 2007. Inside is the one name who can clear me, or bury me." Meredith opened the envelope with a letter opener. A single sheet of faded paper bore a handwritten name and an old diplomatic seal. She didn't recognize the name, but the seal chilled her. It was from an agency she'd only read about in policy briefings, a division that operated beneath the public record. Why now? Because they'll come for me soon. And because this school is the first place that ever felt like home. What did you do, Harold? He sighed. I translated threats. Interrogated men who'd never heard their native tongue from an American. Delivered messages no one else could phrase just right. Until one message led to a mistake. People died. I left. I buried Langston Hale. Meredith slid the paper into her desk and stood. Then let's make sure Lincoln Prep stays yours. You've earned that much. The rest of the day passed under a haze of tension. Harold resumed his janitorial duties. Students greeted him like always. Yet the air around him buzzed with invisible pressure. He moved slower, more deliberately, like someone counting down to something inevitable. At 6 p.m., Meredith made a call to a friend at the State Department. Discreet. Unrecorded. This is off the books, she said. I need to find someone connected to a Langston Hale. There was silence on the line. I'll see what I can do, the voice said. But you didn't hear that name from me. Meredith looked out her window at the empty parking lot. Her reflection in the glass looked foreign, not the polished principal, but a woman on the edge of a world she didn't understand. Meanwhile, Weller reviewed surveillance of room 217. Harold, now Langston again, stood at the blackboard surrounded by eager students. They laughed, learned, admired him. Weller frowned. He's a threat, his supervisor texted. He's a teacher, Weller typed back. But he didn't send it. Instead, he deleted the thread. That night, Meredith received a call back. That name. Langston Hale. He was a deep language asset embedded across diplomatic sectors. Disappeared under disputed circumstances. If he's alive, you may be harboring a ghost of the state. He's not a ghost, she whispered. He's my staff. My mentor. My friend. Then be careful who else finds him. At 11 p.m., Meredith drove back to the school. Alone in her office, she opened Harold's personnel file again and compared it to the name on the sealed letter. Her hands trembled. She placed both items in her safe and locked it. Outside, a light flickered in room 217. Harold sat alone, chalk in hand, drawing phonetic trees on the board. Preparing. Waiting. He knew what morning might bring. Friday morning began like any other. Students filed into classrooms. The aroma of cinnamon rolls floated from the cafeteria. But at 9 a.m., Meredith sent out a school-wide announcement, * all staff and upper-grade students to the auditorium. Mandatory, * within minutes, the auditorium filled. Teachers whispered. Students exchanged curious glances. Rumors swirled, budget cuts. A resignation. Disciplinary action. At 9:30, the lights dimmed. A single spotlight bathed the podium. Meredith stepped onto the stage, note cards in hand, heart pounding. This week, she began, her voice steady, you saw someone new in an old uniform. You saw a teacher where some only saw a janitor. And you learned what it means to look deeper. The murmuring stopped. Mr. Harold Benton has served this school for 17 years. He has fixed our boilers, cleaned our halls, and watched over us in silence. What most of you didn't know is that he speaks 9 languages. He has lived more lives than most of us can imagine. And he chose to share a piece of that with us. Gasps. Then silence. Then Harold stepped onto the stage, dressed in a gray suit, calm as stone. He looked out over the crowd. I was never supposed to be seen, he said. But your curiosity, your courage to ask who I am, that pulled me into the light. He paused. Language isn't just translation. It's identity. It's power. It's understanding. And you deserve all of it. Even from someone like me. Then, switching languages, he offered greetings in French, Arabic, and Mandarin. Each one met with awe. I am not perfect. I have made mistakes. But here, I found something rare. Respect. Purpose. The room erupted in applause. Students stood. Teachers clapped. A few wiped tears. Harold's eyes scanned the crowd. In the back, he spotted Weller. Later, in the hallway, Weller approached Meredith by the vending machines. He won't run, Weller said. And you won't chase. Weller smiled. Not this time. He handed her a business card. Just in case. As Harold passed by, their eyes met. No fear. Just recognition. Weller gave him a quiet nod. And Harold nodded back. That afternoon, Meredith drafted a proposal to formalize Harold's mentorship program. No more secrets. No more hiding. The past was no longer a weight. It had become the foundation. Monday morning came with no announcements, no meetings, no visible tension. Just the sounds of locker doors slamming, sneakers squeaking, and the hum of the bell. Life resumed. But beneath the ordinary rhythm of the day, something new had rooted itself deep into the bones of Lincoln Prep: respect. For Harold. For what had been hidden so long in plain sight. At 11 a.m., Meredith received an envelope stamped with the district superintendent's seal. Inside, a request for an urgent meeting. She drove downtown that afternoon and was ushered into a boardroom filled with stern faces, polished shoes, and even colder stares. A man in a navy suit cleared his throat. We understand you've recently featured a member of your custodial staff in a public teaching role. Meredith stayed composed. Yes. Harold Benton. He's a polyglot with extraordinary talent and integrity. There are concerns. Vetting. Liability. Public image. If we turned away every genius without a degree, we'd have no innovation left. They leaned in. Who is he, really? We've reviewed his file. It's suspiciously empty. She didn't blink. He's the best decision this school has ever made. Parents may not be pleased. Parents have been asking if he can tutor their kids privately. The only complaints I've had are from teachers who suddenly feel inadequate. After an hour of pushback, Meredith stood. You can investigate him. I've done my own. He's not a danger. He's a gift. And unless you plan to punish excellence, we'll continue the mentorship program. There was silence. One board member gave her a slight nod before she walked out. Back at school, Harold was waiting in her office, seated with a book in hand, an old Arabic translation of Marcus Aurelius. They called you in, he said. They did. And you still stood by me. You stood by us for 17 years. It was our turn. He smiled. Not a polite nod, but a full, genuine smile that erased a decade of guardedness from his face. He looked lighter somehow, like he had finally set something down he had carried too long. Later that day, Meredith posted a notice: Lincoln Prep is proud to announce Mr. Harold Benton as our new Cultural and Linguistic Enrichment Advisor. The students' reactions were instant and electrifying. Cheering erupted in the lunchroom. In the halls, kids began mimicking Harold's multilingual greetings. Some were silly, some surprisingly accurate. A few even lined up at room 217 to ask if they could join the next session. We'll need a bigger room, Harold told them, laughing softly. For once, he didn't fade into the background. In the faculty lounge, a once skeptical Mr. Rayborn approached Harold with a handshake. You made believers of us all. It wasn't belief you needed, Harold replied. Just perspective. Outside, in a parked car just beyond the faculty lot, Weller watched the kids high-fiving Harold. He observed the man who once decoded threats for world powers now decoding hope for teenagers. He made a final call. He's clean. Let him be. Noted, the voice on the other end said. We're closing the file. Weller tucked his phone away, turned the key, and drove off into the fading sun. That evening, Harold returned to Recordsby one last time. He packed his books, erased the whiteboard, folded the blanket, and stood in the room that had hidden his past. Then he turned off the lights. He wasn't hiding anymore. 3 months later, Lincoln Prep hosted its annual language symposium, now renamed the Benton Cultural Summit. The school had never seen such transformation. Hallways were lined with student art inspired by world cultures. Flags from 20 nations fluttered above the cafeteria. The library was packed with multilingual dictionaries and guest speakers. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation. Local media had arrived. Parents filled the back rows. Even district officials showed up, quiet, observant, a little uncomfortable. Meredith opened the ceremony with the clarity of a leader who had weathered storms and emerged sharper for it. 3 months ago, we discovered someone extraordinary walking our halls unnoticed. Not anymore. Today, we celebrate the language of possibility. And it is my great honor to welcome the man who helped us find it, Mr. Harold Benton. The lights dimmed, and Harold stepped onto the stage. No longer in a janitor's uniform, but in a dark tailored suit stitched with a subtle Lincoln Prep crest. The room rose to its feet. He looked out at the crowd, his voice steady, his presence commanding. We build barriers with misunderstanding. We tear them down with language. Today, I speak not as a custodian, not as a former shadow, but as a man who found purpose in the most unexpected place, among students, chalk, and open doors. Then he began his speech, first in French, then in Swahili, Russian, Arabic, Japanese, and German. Each sentence centered on one message: unity, learning, and truth. Then, in English, our differences are not barriers. They are bridges. What I hid for years wasn't fear, it was the belief that I would never be allowed to give. But you let me. And now, I give this to you. He stepped aside as his students, those from his original pilot sessions, took the stage. One recited a haiku in perfect Japanese. Another performed a rap verse in French. A third offered Shakespeare's soliloquy in Spanish. Every performance met with thunderous applause. Parents were moved. Teachers were stunned. Students were changed. After the event, Meredith stood with Harold in the courtyard. The banners still waved. Kids ran past speaking in fractured Spanish, laughing. "What will you do now?" she asked. He looked over the quad. Students sat in circles, trading vocabulary cards. A girl taught another how to roll her R's. Teachers smiled quietly from benches. "I'll stay," he said. "If that's all right." "It's more than all right." He nodded. "Maybe this time, I don't need to disappear." A breeze stirred the flags overhead. The janitor who once walked unseen now stood among banners, laughter, and legacy. No longer hidden. No longer silent. He was, finally, home. In a world where we often judge others by uniforms, titles, or silence, this story reminds us, extraordinary people don't always announce themselves. Sometimes, they mop the floors. Sometimes, they speak 9 languages while unlocking a hallway door. Harold's story isn't just about redemption, it's about recognition. And it's about how one chance can change everything. Let's build a world where no gift goes unnoticed. If this story moved you, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs a reminder of their worth, and subscribe to this channel for more real, powerful human stories. Let's turn silence into purpose, together.